This video is about combat arenas, and in it we'll be breaking down the spaces in the new Doom games. We'll talk a little bit about push-forward combat as a design pillar, we'll take a look at combat chess and how this influences the enemy designs, and then we'll break down some spaces and see why they work. What I love about Doom is probably what everybody else loves about Doom. Rushing around the spaces, guns blazing, ripping and tearing. Back in 2016 though, this was a breath of fresh air to a genre that had largely been pushing further and further towards cover-based, on-rails corridor shooters, or giant open world affairs where the dominant strategy was to fill spaces with lots of almost identical mobs and overwhelm with numbers. Doom changed this with a bunch of great design ideas, such as combat chess and push-forward combat. If you are already across these two concepts because you've been following Doom, skip to here and we'll start looking at the spaces. Otherwise, here's a quick explanation. If you aren't familiar with New Doom and its design, the New Doom game's enemy design revolves around an idea called combat chess. It's the idea that every enemy is a piece of a combat puzzle, and it has a role within a combat encounter, similar to pieces on a chessboard. And these pieces will elicit certain behaviour from the player, or require certain behaviour to overcome. So to create varied combat encounters, the developers simply need to arrange the pieces in different combinations. So the Hell Knight will chase after you, and bite at your heels, and is very dangerous up close. Imps do large amounts of damage unless the player keeps moving. The Mancubus is powerful at range. Summoners spawn new demons into the fight, so they prompt the player to play aggressively and kill them early. Now from here you may think that the best thing is to stay back, take cover and shoot everything from a distance. The developers, however, were leaning into the idea that Doom is the most fun when played out in the open and moving, not hiding. It was from here the design pillar of push-forward combat was born. A bunch of choices were made to get the player moving and up close and personal with the enemies, the most notable of these being glory kills, which is a special type of kill that requires the player to get close to an enemy, and when performed, rewards the player with a bunch of health. Similar to this is the chainsaw, which also requires you to get close, but instead will shower the player in ammunition. Doom Eternal completes the trifecta by adding the flame belch, which makes enemies catch on fire and drop armor shards. For the player to stay alive, they will need to tactically get in and out of close quarters with the demons, inherently making cover-based gameplay unfeasible. For all this to work though, the spaces the player navigates need to accommodate for both these design decisions for the enemies, and to give the player the opportunity to handle each one of these problems. You can't just dump a bunch of enemies in a corridor like in Call of Duty, or the player will get locked down and annihilated. The player needs spaces where they are mobile enough to handle each of the chess pieces, but also get in and out without getting trapped by a bunch of demons. So let's start breaking down combat spaces. Keep these concepts in mind and think about how they play into the design of From here, I'm going to try to distill down Doom spaces into their components. Let's go. Openness. Is that a word? I think that's a word. You will notice that all these arenas are open. Like, very open. Which is the vast majority of spaces in Doom. Large, open areas. Even the inside locations span out to vast open rooms where the most intense combat is placed. This lets the speed and mobility of the Doomslayer be on show, as they strafe laterally to avoid fire and attacks, and approach demons from different angles. Getting locked down in a corridor or closed space can still happen, but limiting these closed spaces means the player can push forward where they want to and handle problems in a number of ways as they come up. Also, not to say that you never get caught in a small room with a demon, but these fights are few and far between. The openness of these spaces also contributes to the difficulty. Were these spaces designed as corridors, the demons would only have a few options for pathing to get to the player. With large open spaces, the enemies can cut the player off, cut corners, pop up in front of the player, or pressure them no matter where they are, promoting constant movement and literally providing no cover. But we can't just have a big empty circle over and over and over again. So, what's next? Verticality. Doom levels have verticality, often lots of verticality, and often this translates to a wide open area above the ground level of the play space with very little in it. This does a huge number of things in the level design. Firstly, it just creates more options. Let's say we have a Hell Knight on our heels. If we think about this area as a corridor, or even just a horizontal space, we essentially have 3 options: keep going straight, go left, or go right. Taking advantage of verticality creates a plethora of other options for the player. In our simple example, we go from 3 to 9, which here translates to something like this. These options are crucial, as Doom is all about making split-second decisions, and by adding verticality, the player has a lot more options at their disposal. You could probably freeze every couple of seconds of Doom gameplay and pick out 5 different options for the player to push forward into. The monkey bars in Doom Eternal also take verticality to another level by offering even more options for the player to get up high, allowing them to utilize verticality for aerial play, which also opens up aerial combat. Walkways are key enablers for this kind of gameplay by allowing you to drop off the sides, keep going, continue to climb, or launch into aerial combat from any point. The player can also take advantage of this height to get information. Climbing up on top of the level allows you to survey the surroundings and keep tabs on many of the slower moving targets, or identify demons that have strayed from the pack. The open vertical spaces also allow for specific demons like cacodemons and the pain elemental. These need space to fly in, so having large vertical spaces offers a place to utilize these chess pieces. Suddenly the sky isn't so safe for the Slayer, and the verticality can be a hindrance as well as an advantage, which creates risk-reward rather than blanket safe space. So we have a wide open level with lots of verticality to it, but this doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to end up with a great combat space. This is one arena from Doom Eternal. It's essentially a giant open area with 2 very vertical sides, but I think this arena sucks. Why? Because there's no cohesion between all the different parts. You are either on one side or the other and trying to climb as high as possible, and you often get cut off. What do other spaces do to help with this? Paths. Push forward combat needs a place to push forward into. When playing Doom, you will notice that the levels flow from one part to another. This is the result of paths. Creating paths allows the player to always have a place to go. Often these paths will wrap back around on each other, allowing players to chain together movement in a collage of different path sections. Arenas in Doom Eternal seem to have a main path that then splits into different options created by the verticality, and detours presented by pickups. You will run up a path like this, come to a decision point, assess the situation, choose a new path and keep going. Paths cut down on the noise of the situation, making spaces easy to read and outcomes easier to predict by knowing that you aren't going to run into a dead end. And while not everywhere has a defined path, you will almost never find a dead end. This means a player is never going to end up at the end of a path and find themselves trapped. These grab lifts, is that what they're called, are often used to allow verticality in a space, but also plug up any dead ends that might break the player's momentum. But we can't just throw some paths in and call it a day. Communicating to the player. So paths are added in, but the player also needs to have options. How does all of this get communicated to the player? Paths are often wider than the connecting tissue. This gives the visual aid that if you are going down a tight space, you might need to mantle your way out of a problem. Armor shards are placed in trails on the ground to guide the player as they move through the space. And pickups like health are placed off to the sides to drag the players off the path and reveal new options. You might turn and pick up a health or ammo pickup and jump off a ledge rather than continue, which reveals other options for when you circle back around and helps you learn the space better. Some spaces may look like a T-junction, but in fact only be a left turn. Armor shards are used to imply direction to a player so they aren't getting stuck in a tight space. Breathing room. If you have played Doom, you know the feeling of being buried in a swarm of demons or feeling like you are an inch from death for 5 minutes straight. In Doom Eternal, many of the arenas have either a portal or a large grav lift thing that will land the player on the other side of the arena. This is a nice addition because it throws the player a bone once in a while. Suddenly being on the other side of the map gives time for players to survey the arena and come up with a new plan. It lets them maybe take a few extra seconds to charge up a more powerful shot, but most of all, for me at least, it helps if the player is getting swamped and needs an escape. The player can use the portal as an escape, reset, check their stats and their weapons, and then dive back into the thick. I have often taken this opportunity in Doom Eternal to set up for scorching some demons to regain armor. We have covered a lot, so let's bring all these components together now. We have big open spaces that we can survey easily. We jump in and take advantage of the mobility of the Doomslayer to flank our enemies, and our enemies have many options to cut us off in the big open spaces. We follow the paths in the spaces to move around the level in a constant and cohesive manner, knowing we aren't going to get stuck, and that when things get tight, we can detour off our path. As we move around the spaces, we are presented with many different options to chain together paths and back areas. Verticality of these spaces significantly increases these options, as the player can go up and down as well as ahead. This lets us string together sections of different paths at a split second's notice. It also lets us use the monkey bars to broaden our options when moving from path section to path section. Our main path is often communicated by the width of the space we are traversing, or by the walkway we are on, so the player can get back on track if they find themselves off the main path. Pickups highlight other options to us, which help us grow our understanding of the space and draw us away from following one path, the one that we found first. And most of the time, if we need it, we have a get out of jail free card in the form of a portal or gravity lift that lets us escape, take a breather, and come up with a new plan. These kind of breakdown videos are a really good way to slow down and notice all of the little design tricks that go into games, and I find this process offers great nuggets of advice. I have a similar video breaking down a level in God of War. It's much more in depth, and I walk through the level and point out all the little cool design features. It's on the screen right now if you want to check that out. There's a bell next to the subscribe button if you want to hear more of this kind of thing in the future. Thanks for watching, and here is a picture of a mango with the oil painting filter. If you have a piece of art that you want to show at the end of one of my videos, hit me up on Twitter. I'll put the art up and we can put your handle underneath it just for the end so they have something to sign off with.